If you live alone, and every night at exactly the same time, someone knocks on your wall, don't knock back, because sometimes it isn't your neighbor trying to get your attention. Sometimes it's something trying to find out if you can hear it. Daniel Mercer moved into apartment 14 because it was cheap. That should have been the warning sign. The building sat near the edge of a dying part of Chicago. Old brick apartments, flickering streetlights, empty storefronts covered in metal shutters and graffiti. The kind of neighborhood where nobody looked at each other for too long. Daniel didn't care. After his breakup, after losing his previous job, after months of barely keeping himself together, cheap was all he needed. The landlord barely spoke during the lease signing, an older man with bloodshot eyes and nicotine-stained fingers. He kept glancing toward Daniel's paperwork like he wanted the conversation over quickly. "You live alone?" the landlord asked. Daniel nodded. The man hesitated for a second, then slid the keys across the desk. "Don't answer the knocking." Daniel frowned. "What?" The landlord forced a laugh. "Pipes," he said quickly. "Old building, noisy at night." Daniel accepted the keys, but as he walked away, he noticed something strange. The landlord never smiled, not once. The apartment itself looked normal enough. Small kitchen, old wooden floors, a narrow hallway leading to a bedroom, one bathroom, one living room window facing the alley behind the building, and silence. Too much silence. The neighbors barely existed. No TVs through the walls, no footsteps overhead, no muffled conversations, nothing. Daniel unpacked slowly that night while rain hit the windows outside. The building creaked constantly. Old pipes, shifting wood, normal sounds. At least that's what he kept telling himself. By midnight, he was exhausted. He collapsed onto the bed and fell asleep almost immediately. Then, knock. Daniel's eyes opened. He looked toward the clock, 2:13 a.m. Another knock, 3 slow taps, from the wall beside his bed. Daniel sat up slowly. The sound came again, same rhythm, same spacing, like someone calmly tapping from the apartment next door. He rubbed his eyes. Probably the pipes, just like the landlord said. Then, a voice, very faint, barely audible through the wall. "Hello?" Daniel froze. A woman's voice, weak, almost trembling. "Can you hear me?" Daniel stared at the wall. Every instinct told him something was wrong. The voice sounded too close, not muffled enough, like whoever was speaking was standing directly on the other side. "Please." A soft knock followed. Daniel got out of bed carefully, walked toward the wall, pressed his ear against it. Cold. The wall felt freezing cold. "I think he's inside." Daniel stepped back instantly. "What the hell?" Silence. Then, a loud bang echoed somewhere down the hallway outside his apartment. Daniel jumped, his pulse quickening now. He walked toward the front door slowly and looked through the peephole. Nothing. Empty hallway, dim yellow light flickering overhead. No movement, no people. Then, knock, 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 behind him, from the bedroom wall again. Daniel spun around. The voice returned immediately, panicked now. "Inuts, don't let him see you." Daniel grabbed his phone. No signal, not low signal, none. The screen displayed no service. He frowned harder. That made no sense. The apartment had Wi-Fi, cell towers, a city outside, but his phone felt dead. Then the voice whispered, he knows you're listening." The bedroom light flickered. Once, twice, then shut off completely. Darkness swallowed the room. Daniel backed away slowly and heard something new. Breathing, not his own. Another breath, inside the apartment. Slow, wet, close. Daniel reached for the kitchen knife without even thinking. The darkness in the hallway felt thicker somehow, heavy. Then, the voice behind the wall screamed, "Don't look at him." Daniel turned instinctively and saw it. A shape standing at the end of the hallway. Tall, too tall. Its head nearly touching the ceiling. No face, just darkness, like the outline of a person cut out of reality itself. Daniel couldn't move. The thing tilted its head slowly, then took one step forward. The floorboards creaked under its weight. Daniel finally snapped out of it and ran. He locked himself inside the bathroom, heart slamming against his ribs. The apartment outside fell silent again, completely silent. Then, knock on the bathroom door. 3 slow taps. Daniel covered his mouth tightly. Then the woman's voice whispered again, this time inside the bathroom with him. It mimics people. Daniel spun around. Nothing there, but the mirror above the sink looked wrong. His reflection wasn't moving correctly. He moved slightly. The reflection moved a second later, delayed, smiling. Daniel stumbled backward. Then the reflection raised one hand slowly, even though Daniel hadn't moved, and tapped on the inside of the mirror 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. The bathroom light exploded. Glass shattered everywhere. Daniel screamed and forced the bathroom door open. The hallway outside was empty again. No creature, no breathing, no sounds, just darkness. Then his phone buzzed. Signal restored. 1 notification. Unknown voicemail. Timestamp 2:13 a.m. Hands shaking violently, Daniel pressed play. Static filled the speaker. Then, his own voice whispered back at him, "Don't let him see you." The next morning, Daniel left the apartment, packed everything, didn't even ask for his deposit back. But before leaving, he stopped by the landlord's office. The old man looked exhausted when he saw him, like he already knew. "You heard her," the landlord whispered quietly. Daniel stared at him. "What is in that apartment?" The landlord looked toward the hallway, then lowered his voice. "The woman who lived there before you." He swallowed hard. "They found her inside the walls." Daniel felt cold all over. "What do you mean inside the walls?" The landlord's eyes watered slightly. "She kept hearing knocking every night." His voice cracked, and eventually, she knocked back. There's a gas station somewhere in northern Arizona that doesn't appear on any map. Truckers whisper about it sometimes. Late-night drivers too. Most people laugh it off. An urban legend, a desert hallucination, but the stories are always strangely similar. A lonely highway, a broken GPS, a gas station appearing where there shouldn't be one, and a man standing beside Pump 2, watching, waiting. Eli Turner didn't believe in stories like that, at least not before that night. He had been driving for almost 9 hours straight after leaving his father's funeral in Nevada. The entire trip felt numb, heavy, like his body was moving but his mind hadn't caught up yet. The desert outside stretched endlessly beneath the headlights, black mountains in the distance, dead road ahead, no traffic. No radio stations lasting more than a few seconds before dissolving into static. The GPS kept rerouting itself every 10 minutes. Signal lost, recalculating, route unavailable. Eventually, Eli just muted it. By 1:17 a.m., his gas light turned on. He muttered under his breath and checked the road ahead. Nothing, no signs, no exits, just darkness swallowing the highway. His phone had no signal, not even 1 bar. Then, the radio crackled suddenly. A voice pushed through the static. "Don't stop." Eli frowned and adjusted the volume. Static again, then silence. He laughed nervously to himself. "Too tired," he whispered. But 10 minutes later, he saw the sign, GAS 2 miles. The letters were faded badly, rust covered the edges, and one of the bulbs illuminating the sign flickered weakly. Still, it was the first sign of civilization he'd seen in over an hour, so he took the exit. The road immediately felt wrong, too narrow, too quiet, cracks splitting through the pavement like veins. The headlights barely seemed to reach the end of it. Then he saw the gas station, small, old, 2 pumps. One convenience store, buzzing fluorescent lights overhead, and a man standing beside Pump 2, watching the road, watching him. Eli slowed instinctively. Something about the man felt unnatural. He stood perfectly still, not shifting his weight, not scratching his face, not blinking, just standing there in a dark jacket with his arms hanging loosely at his sides, face hidden beneath the station lights. Eli considered driving away, but the gas gauge dropped lower, almost empty. So he parked beside Pump 1. The moment he stepped out, the silence hit him, hard. No wind, no insects, no distant highway sounds, nothing. Even the humming lights overhead sounded muffled somehow. The man beside Pump 2 finally spoke. "You're low on fuel." His voice sounded emotionless, flat, like he was reading from memory instead of speaking naturally. Eli forced a nod. "Yeah." The man tilted his head slightly. "You came alone?" Eli hesitated. "Yeah." The man stared at him for a long moment, then quietly said, "That's unfortunate." Eli laughed awkwardly. What's that supposed to mean? No response. The man just turned his eyes slowly toward the desert behind the station, like he was listening to something far away. Eli started pumping gas quickly. That's when he noticed the prices. 89 cents a gallon. Impossible. He stared at the numbers for several seconds, then looked toward the convenience store windows, and his stomach tightened instantly. No reflections. Not his. Not the pumps. Not the lights. The windows looked completely black, like empty holes cut into the building. The man suddenly spoke again. You shouldn't stay after 1:30. Eli looked over. Why? The man smiled slightly. Too slightly. You'll hear them. A cold feeling moved through Eli's chest. Hear who? The lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then went out completely. Darkness swallowed everything. Eli froze. His breathing suddenly sounded too loud. Then, click, the lights returned, and the man was gone. Eli spun around immediately. Empty station, no footsteps, no movement, nothing. Then the convenience store door creaked open slowly by itself. A soft voice whispered from inside, "Help me." Eli stared at the doorway. A woman stood inside the store, blood covering her shirt. One hand pressed tightly against her stomach, her face pale with panic. "Please," she whispered. "He's coming back." Eli stepped toward the entrance automatically. What happened? The woman looked terrified. "You need to leave." Then her eyes shifted behind him, and the fear in her expression changed instantly. Not fear anymore. Recognition. Oh God. Eli turned slowly. The man from Pump 2 stood directly behind him. Closer now, smiling. The smile stretched far too wide, almost splitting his face. The woman whispered desperately, "Don't let him touch you." The lights flickered again, and suddenly, the woman disappeared. Gone. Only the man remained, standing silently beneath the fluorescent lights. Eli backed away slowly. "What the hell are you?" The man tilted his head, then took one slow step forward. Something about the movement felt deeply wrong, like his legs bent incorrectly beneath the shadows. Then another step, closer. Eli stumbled backward toward his car. The gas pumps suddenly activated by themselves, numbers spinning wildly. Fuel spraying onto the pavement. The smell became overwhelming instantly. The smiling man stopped walking and softly whispered, "Run." Eli didn't hesitate. He jumped into the driver's seat and slammed the accelerator. The tires screamed against the pavement as he shot back down the road. But the road behind him looked wrong now. Longer, darker. The headlights barely reached ahead anymore. Then, his rearview mirror changed. The gas station wasn't getting farther away. It was getting closer, even though he was speeding away from it. The station lights grew larger in the mirror. The smiling man standing directly in the center of the road now, watching. Eli's breathing became frantic. He pushed the car faster, 100 miles per hour. Then, the radio crackled again. "Don't look at him." Eli stared ahead tightly, but something forced his eyes back toward the mirror. The man was suddenly closer, much closer, standing directly behind the car now, still smiling, still watching. Then, his headlights died. Total darkness. Eli screamed and slammed the brakes. The car spun violently across the road before crashing sideways into a ditch. For several seconds, he couldn't breathe. His ears rang painfully. Then, on the driver's side window, Eli turned slowly. The smiling man stood inches away from the glass, rainwater dripping from his jacket now. Even though it wasn't raining, the man leaned closer and whispered through the glass, "You stayed too long." Then all the lights returned instantly. The highway reappeared. Normal road, normal desert, no gas station, no man, nothing. Eli sat there shaking violently until sunrise. The next morning, he searched online for the station. Nothing existed. No maps, no records, no businesses on that highway. Then he found an old newspaper article from 1987, a gas station explosion in northern Arizona, 7 people killed, no survivors. The attached photograph showed firefighters standing near the burned remains of the station, and in the background, partially hidden behind the smoke, stood the smiling man from Pump 2, watching the camera, unburned, perfectly still. Eli never drove through Arizona again, but sometimes, late at night, his gas gauge suddenly drops for no reason, his radio fills with static, and somewhere beneath the noise, he hears a familiar voice whisper, "You should have kept driving."